Picture this. You're at the helm of a massive steel leviathan carrying thousands of tons of cargo, slicing through the pitch-black night across a vast, totally unpredictable ocean. Out here, the stakes are absolutely immense. A single mistake doesn't just mean a delayed shipment. We're talking devastating environmental disasters, staggering financial losses, and worst of all, the tragic loss of human life. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into the fascinating evolution of the technology that keeps these massive vessels from colliding in the dark. And as you'll see, a groundbreaking shift in visual mathematics is poised to completely revolutionize safety at sea. So let's jump right into a wildly pressing question. How exactly do these massive ships avoid crashing when the fog rolls in? For centuries, honestly, the answer was just human vigilance and a whole lot of luck. But as ships got larger and faster, the oceans became infinitely more dangerous. The core problem of maritime navigation was tragically thrust into the public eye by some horrific historical disasters. Because when visibility drops to zero, how do you actually know what's right in front of you? The industry had to find a way to see through the fog, and it was ultimately a catastrophic failure of the old ways that forced a hard pivot toward automated technological solutions. Tracing this evolution, the modern era of collision avoidance really kicked into high gear right after 1956. That was the year the Italian liner SS Andrea Doria collided with the MS Stockholm in dense fog off the U.S. East Coast and tragically sank. It was a massive wake-up call for the entire world. Moving into the 1960s, the rapid development of microelectronics finally gave engineers the tools they desperately needed. That paved the way for 1969, a huge landmark year, when the very first commercial automatic radar plotting aid, or ARPA, was delivered to the cargo liner MV Timir. And finally, by the 1980s, the introduction of raster scan displays gave mariners those bright, television-style screens that fundamentally changed how radar data was viewed on the bridge. Now, just think about the sheer, overwhelming volume of radar skills human operators are expected to master just to legally stand watch. The STCW Competencies Matrix for Radar Navigation, which stands for Standards of Training, Certification, and Watchkeeping, is absolutely staggering. Navigators have to intimately understand principal types of ARPA, true and relative vectors, the derivation of critical echoes, exclusion areas, and trial maneuvers. The mental load placed on a human navigator is just immense. They aren't just glancing at a screen. They are performing complex, high-stakes mental gymnastics in real time every single shift. To take some of that immense pressure off the crew, ARPA systems became standardized to handle the heavy mathematical lifting. Standard ARPA provides true or relative motion radar presentations, meaning it constantly tracks where things are moving. It features automatic and manual target acquisition, locking onto ships in the area. But crucially, it provides a digital readout of CPA, the closest point of approach, and TCPA, the time to closest point of approach. Basically, the computer processes the digital vectors and tells the mariner exactly how close a ship will get and in how many minutes. It even allows for visual trial maneuvers, letting a captain safely test a course change on the screen before actually turning the real ship. Actually, a quick aside before we get too deep into the software side of things, we have to acknowledge the raw physical power of this hardware. There's a stark warning that comes directly from the FAR 257 Operator's Manual. It explicitly says, never look directly into the antenna aperture. Why? Because the radar antenna emits severe electromagnetic radio frequency energy. It is so intense that standing too close to the transmitting antenna can cause literal physical harm, particularly to your eyes. It's just a fascinating, kind of scary reminder that the invisible net of safety cast by a ship's radar is generated by an incredibly hazardous piece of technology spinning right above the crew's heads. Okay, so how does a navigator actually use this powerful tool on a day-to-day basis? Well, even with ARPA, avoiding a collision is a surprisingly tedious manual sequence. First, the operator has to assess the initial radar plot to figure out the current situation. Second, they determine the effect of their intended maneuver. They're essentially asking the machine, hey, if I turn starboard 20 degrees, am I going to clear that ship? Third, they actually execute the alteration. And fourth, they have to continuously plot and replot to ensure the maneuver is actually working. It relies heavily on trial and error, testing out hypothetical movements over and over just to ensure a safe passing distance. And right here is where we run into a major problem, comparing the current standard of relative motion against the chaotic reality of today's congested waterways. You see, relative motion evaluates risk based on straight lines and requires that tedious trial and error approach we just talked about. It literally forces the navigator to guess a maneuver, punch it into the ARPA, and hope the math checks out. But modern waterways aren't empty straightaways. They're incredibly congested. Navigating a busy strait or port requires rapid, dynamic responses to multiple targets at once, often weaving through traffic along complex, broken line paths. Relying on the old trial and error method out there, it's literally like trying to merge onto a packed highway while doing calculus in your head. It's just entirely too slow and rigid. When you really dig into the vector math behind relative motion, you can see why it's so tough. You've got the vector of your ship, the vector of the target ship, and then this totally abstract relative vector cutting across. From all that, the navigator just gets abstract numbers, a distance, and a time to the closest point of approach. The system doesn't clearly show you your actual ability to avoid the collision based on your specific speed. And worse, it doesn't map easily to the actual physical geography on a nautical chart. The human brain is forced to translate these floating relative lines and abstract numbers into a physical reality, which is insanely difficult to do under immense pressure.
And the consequence of forcing a human brain to do all that abstract math under high stress? Well, it's pretty shocking. According to a past survey highlighted in the TransNav journal, 43% of near misses at sea are caused by the navigators themselves. Let that sink in for a second. Almost half of the time ships nearly crash into each other, it's a direct result of human error in the decision-making process. The system of collecting information has improved massively with GPS and modern radar, sure, but the processing side, how we actually evaluate that risk using relative motion, has totally failed to keep up. We urgently need a better, more visual system. This is where true motion models come to the rescue, marking a truly exciting pivot in maritime safety. There are two key concepts here that are absolute game changers. LOPC, which stands for the line of predicted collision, and OZT, the obstacle zone by target. Instead of feeding a navigator abstract numbers like time to closest point of approach, these true motion models calculate the exact physical coordinates of the danger and draw them directly onto the screen as literal visual shapes and lines. It completely takes the math out of the navigator's head and drops it right onto the map where it belongs.
Let's break down the point of predicted collision, or PPC. Instead of messing with relative vectors, true motion asks a remarkably simple question. At what exact geographical spot will ship A and ship B arrive at the exact same time? By simply multiplying their respective speeds by time elapsed, the system finds the literal physical spot on the ocean where they will meet. If both ships plot a course to that specific point, they crash. The system literally draws a dot on the map that says, hey, whatever you do, do not go here. Now, if you take that concept and calculate every possible point of predicted collision based on different courses, you get this amazing mathematical shape, the line of predicted collision, or LOPC. And the way this shape dynamically shifts is brilliant. If both ships are going the exact same speed, the danger line is just a straight, perpendicular line right down the middle. But if one ship is faster, the danger zone actually curves into mathematical circles surrounding the slower ship. This fundamentally shifts the mariner's perspective. You no longer have to crunch relative speeds in your head, you just look at the screen and instantly see the geometric shape of the danger zone, based purely on your speed ratio. Add the actual physical size of the ships and a safety buffer to that geometric line, and boom, you have the obstacle zone by target, or OZT. The advantages here are incredible. Right off the bat, it visualizes collision risk as a literal, physical place to avoid on the map. Not only that, but if a target ship turns, the OZT moves predictably right along that geometric LOPC curve. In a highly crowded waterway, an individual OZT is displayed for every single target. This completely changes the game because it lets you easily spot a safe, weaving route right through heavy traffic. And best of all, because OZT represents an actual physical location, it can be seamlessly superimposed onto standard navigational charts, helping captains avoid running aground at the exact same time. We've covered a lot of ground today in this explainer, from the tragic loss of the Andrea Doria, through the early days of ARPA, all the way to the bleeding edge of true motion visualization. By transforming abstract relative math into clear, visual obstacle zones right on the map, we're fundamentally evolving how humans interact with radar data. So I'll leave you with this to chew on. As global trade expands and our oceans grow more and more congested every single year, will these true motion visualizations finally conquer that massive 43% human error factor out on the seas? It certainly looks like the geometric key to a much safer future. Thanks so much for joining me, and keep your eyes on the horizon.